Good morning, Life Point Crossing, and my name's Ross. So glad you're here. I definitely apologize. I am not going to be shaking your hand today, fighting through a little bit of a cold. I'm a little gooned up on day meds. I don't know why. Nobody cares. All right. But glad you're here. We're in a series on questions that Jesus asked. A lot of times we talk about commands that Jesus gave or things that Jesus said. Lots of good reason to do that, but he asked lots and lots and lots of questions. So we've been doing this. I think it's interesting. I think it's been good going through some questions. Some of them have been different. Some of them have been questions where we are expected or hopefully we'll find some sort of an answer. Some of them are more rhetorical and they're really sort of statements in question form, but they've been good. And today, I think we're going to see some things really in a little bit of a new light in a couple different ways. So something that I am absolutely convinced of is that there's very little in our world that is random or accidental. I think in 1,000 ways, sometimes big and obvious, sometimes subtle and quiet, everything in the created and physical world that we live in and understand helps us point to and understand things that are spiritual or eternal. A fairly easy, obvious example is in Galatians 6. Paul says that, hey, you know what? You reap what you sow. A lot of times I hear people quote that as though that's a tremendous biblical insight into agriculture. It's not. Everybody who read that already knew that if you plant wheat seeds, you end up getting a bunch of wheat. If you want hummus, you plant chickpea seeds, and then you get a bunch of chickpeas, and then you can make that into hummus. What that is, and it's very clear if you read Galatians 6, is it's Paul explaining that the same way that you all know agriculture works, you plant seeds, and then that's what you harvest, is if you want to harvest righteousness, then you don't get that by planting sin, you have to plant righteousness. And so the physical world that we live in helps us understand that things also work in some similar ways spiritually. A little bit different, but in the chapter actually right before where we'll be landing for today, Jesus uses 3 different short little vignettes to talk about and help explain how God feels about people, specifically even people who maybe other people might not think are super valuable or should be valued by God, really, if we look at the context in which Jesus is talking. So he says, you know what, there's a shepherd who has 100 sheep, he loses one. What's he going to do? Everybody knew that shepherd was going to do whatever it took to go find that one valuable lost sheep because it was very valuable, and that helps understand how God feels about a person who's apart from him. Then he says, you know, there's a woman who has 10 gold coins. She loses one. What's she going to do? Well, she's going to tear her house apart to find that one gold coin because it's very, very valuable to her. That's a little bit how God feels about us. And then there's a man that has 2 children, and one of them under terrible circumstances goes away. When that child comes home, oh my goodness, what's that father going to be like? Everybody knew that fathers love their children, and so he's going to be incredibly joyous and welcome them with joy because that helps us then understand how God feels about people. And so I think this is with all sorts of things, that things we see and live in and experience in our physical world help us point to and understand things that are spiritual or eternal. So I don't know if this is some sort of a law that's in the world or if it's just kind of how things go, but it is my observation that most everything in life has a progression. Generally, things start out simple and then grow in complexity or responsibility or whatever the situation is. And this is really so obvious that most of us don't even think about it. Do you know why most major company CEOs tend to be older? Well, what big company is going to hire a teenager or a recent college grad? It's not necessarily categorically that there couldn't be one who could do a good job, but here's what there isn't is a good way to identify that person because they won't have any sort of a track record that you can say, oh, all right, this is a person who has progressed and is ready for this situation. What's much more common is you start at the beginning, right? Don't we all love the story of the person who starts out in the mailroom, does things great, gets a promotion, goes to night school, ends up in charge. I don't know how common that is exactly, but it's probably more common than hiring a teenager or a recent college grad. Probably what's much more common is someone gets a business degree, but then they don't have any experience, so they take an entry-level job that's appropriate for someone with little education but no experience. They do a good job, they get promoted, then they're hired away by some other company, spend a few years in middle management, eventually get a break to go into executive leadership, and then after about 3 decades end up being hired as a CEO of some company, but not until all those things have happened and that progression has taken place. If you're a sports fan, it's the same with how do you get to be the head ball coach? Well, you don't just get to be it. You start out as a graduate assistant. Then you become a position coach at a small school, then you get a position coach at a larger school, then you're a coordinator at a smaller school, then you're a coordinator at a larger school, then you're the head coach at a small school. Maybe then you become the head coach at a school where somebody actually knows your name, and you do a good enough job over a long enough time and enough years, and then you get the position with the responsibility. Let's go a little further, all the way back for any of us, and let's track our relationship with money. Let me say right here, this is not like a give to the church message. Okay, I know people get weird and defensive, so it's not going to be. I guess could be, but it really isn't. But here's where we all start: is with none. When you're born and you're really young, you have absolutely no money. You have no control over any money at all whatsoever. For many years, all you have is the ability to badger your parents, to get them to use some of their money in the ways that you would like, but that's really it. From there, it varies, I'm sure, somewhat with the household and the time and the place and the culture, but probably what's most common for our world, and certainly the house I grew up in, was in your school years at some point you get an allowance. It's a very small amount of money, but with that small amount of money, you then can start to learn about how it works and how to handle money and make good decisions or bad decisions. I can have a candy bar, but only one. So I want to make sure that I make a good decision on that. Or maybe I can save up and get something that's a little more fun, but then that means no candy bars. And so you're going to make some mistakes, but that's okay because you're a kid and it's just a little bit of money. Well, then maybe sometime around junior high, or you take a summer job, or you start babysitting, or you get back in my day, I had a paper route. Or then in high school, you get a part-time job. And now this still isn't really any money compared to an adult budget, but also without bills, you guys, you can start to really build that up and get something really fun with it. Or you can learn how easy it is to blow an entire 2-week paycheck in a couple of hours if you're not careful. Apparently, we have some people who have been at that stage, judging by the snickering here this morning. And then from there, I don't know, maybe the teenager grows into a CEO or whatever, but boy, you hope it doesn't happen too quickly, don't you? Because you all know what happens when someone comes into too much too soon. Either it goes to their head, they start treating people terribly, or maybe they just blow it or blow too much of it. Didn't your Chiefs just draft a guy last week who that very night spent $200,000 buying cars for his mother and his sister, which is a beautiful thing to do, and will probably be fine if he has a long career, but if he doesn't get to that second contract, or he has an injury or things that happen, then you're really nervous about how that's going to go for him, right? Because you need the progression, and you need to learn the lessons at every step and stage that help prepare you for the next one. Well, if this is so clear and we all understand in the world, and we all do you think that maybe this could help us understand something that is more important or spiritual or eternal? Well, Jesus does. And so for today, we're going to be in Luke 16, and he's going to say a couple things and then ask a couple questions. He says, if you're faithful in little things, you'll be faithful in large ones. But if you are dishonest in little things, you won't be honest with greater responsibilities. What are these little things? What's he talking about? Well, and if you are untrustworthy about worldly wealth, okay, well, here comes a question. who will trust you with the true riches of heaven. And if you're not faithful with other people's things, why should you be trusted with things of your own? A couple things here I think that really make sense and help us understand things from a different perspective, which was really amazing because part of what's happening here is this is Jesus helping us to a little bit understand some things from God's perspective, isn't he? And a couple things on some parallel tracks that are a little different, but they kind of go in the same direction. One is the progression, right? This is why teenagers aren't hired as CEOs is let's start small. You need the progression. Let's see how you do with a little bit. In fact, let's start with an allowance. I remember when my allowance was 35 cents a week. It was a long time ago, but not long enough ago that was a lot of money. It was not a lot of money. But then there's what if you don't learn how to handle your allowance? What if you don't learn how to handle your part-time paycheck? Well, whatever you do with the little, you're probably also going to do then with the more. But you've heard this, haven't you, that if somebody comes into money, win the lottery or something, it doesn't really change the person, it just amplifies who they already are. If you're greedy and materialistic when you're poor or middle class and then you come into money, well, now you're going to still be greedy and materialistic. You'll just be able to be more of that. If you're generous and you're giving when you're poor or middle class, then I don't know, you might not be playing the lottery in the first place, but if you have some long-lost husband, man, I'm blaming the drugs on everything today. The notes say uncle, long-lost uncle, that you come into an inheritance, then you're likely to still be generous in giving. You'll just be able to be more of that. If you aren't good with money, the solution isn't to have more money. Right? When you hear it like that, you think, that's kind of true, right? That's just going to make more of a problem. That's just more ammunition to get yourself in trouble. If you're not good with money, the solution isn't to have more money. If you think in those terms, you know that that's true. And so since this is Jesus, and of course what he's talking about is being given greater responsibility, and we understand very clearly that he's talking about what God may or may not be likely to give to somebody, or really you're interested in you, right? You know, here's where, just to take a moment, where prosperity preaching can go really, really wrong, is to take the basic, really true and wonderful idea that Jesus is teaching, which is that if you're faithful with some, then God may give you more, and then turn that into, if you give money to my church, then God's going to give you more money, which I do. Listen, I absolutely believe that almost everybody can live on 90% of what they bring in and be better for it. I do believe that. However, I also believe that if you give money, you're probably then going to have less money and not more. I don't think this is a way for a greedy person to game the system and manipulate God into giving him more of what is very obviously going to be tremendously dangerous for you if that is your mindset and if that was really what you want. And you'll notice that it wasn't Jesus comparing a little bit of money to a lot of money. He was comparing little things, which was worldly wealth, to true riches of heaven. Whatever money you have, that's the little thing. If you have pennies, that's the little thing. If you're sitting on M's, as I understood the kids used to say 15 years ago, that's a little thing, right? And when Jesus says true riches of heaven, that really to me sounds like what he's talking about is next life, not this life. Is it possible that God could perhaps apply some of those steps in this life? Well, God will do what God will do, but it's absolutely not a way to manipulate God, like game the system and get God to give you money because, if that's because you're greedy. That's absolutely not what this is. But part of what this does do is helps us to see things from God's perspective, right? Because whether or not you have kids or you have kids that have had an allowance, we can at least all imagine that kind of situation. And you give the kids the allowance, and part of the reason, right, is so that they can learn to handle that small amount of money. And they're going to make mistakes, but that's okay because they're kids and they're learning, and it's a small amount of money. And so then they'll learn what's a good use, what's not a good use, and they'll need to learn these lessons so that they'll be able to handle the greater responsibilities that are coming. So to get right down to the question that Jesus was asking, if you're untrustworthy with worldly wealth, who will trust you with the true riches of heaven? I think the first answer is, well, nobody with any sense. Definitely not me. And if you can a little bit try and put yourself in the position of God, of course, we can't ever really understand God's perspective, but you wouldn't give something that's valuable to somebody who isn't trustworthy. And so really the answer that Jesus is looking for is, who would trust someone who's untrustworthy with worldly wealth with true riches of heaven? Well, not God. Which is particularly salient because God is the one who is in charge of the true riches of heaven. The other question he asks, well, if you're not faithful with other people's things, why should you be trusted with things of your own? We haven't even touched on this, but this really comes with it, doesn't it? The idea that we don't really even own anything. This is very new for some of you, I'm sure. This is probably not at all new for some others, but this is where we get the idea of what we call stewardship, that really we don't have anything in the first place. It feels like it. We've had some things entrusted to us, but the universe is God's. It's all God's. We're all God's. Everything is God's, and that really changes the way that we think and operate with the things that we have within our control, right? If we do something stupid and ruin something of ours, then that's disappointing, but we're the only one that's disappointed. But now we have to answer up for this. That's one thing if you crash your car. It's another thing if you're doing something stupid and you crash your boss's car. And so this really, I think, can and does apply to anything and everything. I think Jesus uses the idea of money and worldly wealth because he knows humanity, he knows the human heart, he knows that's probably the biggest area of problem for the largest number of people. But it really, I think it can be anything. And he talks about whether we're faithful or not in the little things. We're going to do the same then with the bigger things. Here's a two-pronged major perspective shift that this brings to everything. First of all, everything in this life is a little thing. Like a child with an allowance has no understanding of what it's like to run an adult household or maybe even a business with multi-million dollars. From here on this earth in this life, we have no idea how big things can get. But this by itself is dangerous, so here's what we need to hold with it. How you handle little things. They're little things. But how you handle little things is important. Little does not mean unimportant. Right? And so when we hold these together, everything in life is a little thing, but how you handle little things is important. Now we have a radically different framework for thinking about our life and our decisions and the things that we do, and it's going to make a huge difference in how we can deal with the little things and be faithful with those so that we will be able to be trusted with the bigger things and the true wealth of heaven. I'll bet your money and your budget don't feel like a little thing to you. Yes, I know that rent and food and insurance and all of that can be a real struggle for a lot of us. I'm not minimizing that at all. I think Jesus is just saying, let's look at this from a different perspective. It's not going to last. We all know it's not going to last. But in particular, if you feel like maybe you do have what our world would consider some money, it can feel like a huge thing. It's not. Jesus is loaning you some perspective. Will you please take it from him? It's a little thing. It's an important thing, and it's an opportunity to use it well. But you will use it better if you ignore all the forces around you that tell you, this is such a big thing. And instead you listen to Jesus, who says, look, it's an important thing. Don't waste it. But it's a little thing, really. I'm going to look back, and I'm going to look at what seems like a ton of money now, and it's going to look like my childhood allowance, my 35 cents looks to me now. Guys, you need the progression. The way you handle little things is a great indicator of how you'll handle bigger things. The best predictor of future performance is past results. And if somebody isn't faithful and honest with little things, who's going to trust them with bigger, more important things? You wouldn't. And you don't make better decisions than God does. And so Jesus uses money or wealth, but I really don't think it's specifically money or wealth. I think it is everything in this world and in this life, your time, your energy, your relationships, the way you treat people. And true riches of heaven, what is that anyway? It's kind of tantalizing, right? What exactly are we talking about? A great question. A few different answers that can have some different levels of biblical support. But here's really what I think is important, is that it will make whatever seems big look like a little thing. And I really do think that at least for the most part and most profoundly, it's next life and not this one. Honestly, I hesitate to say that. I wasn't even sure whether really to go here, but I'll tell you why. It's because I'm terrified that for way too many of us, that's not very compelling. I'm very, very afraid that for way too many of us, we think, okay, well, like if I can like get into heaven, but not have it cost me too much in this life, well then, I want that option. That sounds great. Like if we're all going to some incredible island paradise, I don't even like islands, but for the sake of it, I'm talking to you. So we're all going to some incredible island paradise, and we're there in the airport. You can either have a wonderful first-class ticket and stay at the Four Seasons when you're there, or you can have a cramped middle seat and stay at the Motel 6 while you're there. But we'll give you some pretzels while you wait in the terminal. You're like, so I still get to go, like, and I get the pretzels? And they're like, yeah, there's 8 of them in here. And you're like, okay, well, I like the pretzels. Whatever might look or feel or seem like a sacrifice now, it's going to look like absolutely nothing later. Like this is just practice. This is just training. Whatever looks to you like the biggest, greatest, most important thing that could possibly be will make the Super Bowl look like playing with your brother in the backyard. Whatever seems like a ton of money to you now, you're going to look at, and it's going to look like playing Monopoly with your friends when you were 10. And so the question Jesus asked, if you're untrustworthy about worldly things, who will trust you with the riches of heaven? Obvious answer, not God. But the equally obvious implied opposite, hey, if we do learn and grow and we go through the progression and we're faithful with the little things that God gives us here and now, what's going to happen is it will be so much more than worth it. We can't even express. So you guys have a great afternoon. It's a little thing. Okay, but it's an important thing. Have a great week. It's a little thing, but it's an important thing. Have a great life. It's a little thing, but it's an important thing. Okay, let's pray. Father, thank you so much that you don't give us too much too soon, that you give us opportunities in this world and in this life to learn and grow into the people you've created us to be, and that you have grace for us when we fail and when we fall back. I'm still praying if you're here today and for whatever reason you've never taken that first step to connect with Jesus Christ in the first place. Oh, it's as simple as this. Every one of us has sin in our life. There have been things that were wrong. We knew they were wrong. We did them anyway. And God, as the good and just judge of the universe, can't just pretend then that something wrong didn't happen and look the other way. That would make him a horrible, unjust judge. But there is nothing that we as human beings can do to repay the God who created us in the universe in the first place. But that's why Jesus came, died, and resurrected. That was him taking the punishment to satisfy justice on our behalf, on your behalf, so that you could be forgiven and adopted as a child in his family. If that's you, just right where you sit, you can pray out loud or just talk to God silently in your head. Or if you're watching online, whatever the case may be, say, God, I believe that Jesus Christ came and died and resurrected so that I could be forgiven and adopted as a child in your family. Please come into my life. Forgive me and adopt me. Begin to make me into the person you created me to be, and give me the life that you have for me. If you just prayed a prayer like that, it's not the words or the prayer that saves you, it's that you put your faith in Jesus Christ, and God's grace comes to you through that faith, and you are a new spiritual creation in Jesus Christ. Will you please let somebody know if there's a friend who brought you, or you can go talk to the person at the point. That's just the corner in the lobby. Let them know the decision you made, and they'll take your information. We'll be able to follow up with some good next steps. If you're watching online, send us a message. For those of us who this isn't the first day or the first moment or the first week we've been following Jesus, but we all know that there is some room for growth in our life and the way that we handle things, and what seem like the little things or even what seem like the big things to us, but you know that when we look back, it's all going to be little things. What is it right now, just between yourself and the Spirit of God, where you can commit to walk through that progression, to learn what he has for you to learn, to be able to take on the greater things that he has for you in this life or the next, or however God will deal with that. We will trust him fully. But will you right now, whatever it is, will you say yes to God and cooperate with his Spirit and learn to take that next step that he has? Father, we're so grateful that you do give us these opportunities, that you've given us another day and another chance to grow into more of who you've created us to be. Will you give each one of us here the strength and the courage and the follow through to say yes to you and to make the Sunday morning decision into a Monday through Saturday life change for our good and for your glory, Father. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
Hey, LifePoint, I'm Melissa, and as Russ